had a verbal disagreement in?
It was Air Restaurant and Lounge.
And did either of the victims live in the neighborhood?
Offhand, I don't know that info, but we wouldn't disclose the victim info to the public.
Well, I don't want to know specific addresses. I just want to know if the victims or the alleged perpetrator, in one case where you do have an alleged perpetrator, whether they lived in the neighborhood or not.
Yeah, at this time, I don't have any information to say that they live in the neighborhood.
That's all I have.
I can't find my raise hand button. Can I go?
I recognize you, Commissioner Wood.
I'm guessing the answer is no, but any updates on the Nina Larson death from 2021?
No, the follow-up request that we've made to the AUSA, the prosecuting attorney's office, has just been returned with responses saying that it's in for their review. So as far as MPD, our major crash detectives have completed all their investigation, packaged it together with all the evidence that they were able to collect, prepared warrants, and submitted them. And at this point, it's going to be up to the prosecutor's office to determine, weigh all the evidence that they have and determine if any criminal charges will be made. So with the time length that has passed, I think it's reasonable to say right now, if they do have any change of decision or determination that they're going to prosecute any criminal charges, then they'll let us know. But as of now, there's been no updates.
Okay, thank you.
I have one follow-up. Do you know if the restaurant where the altercation began on 18th Street, you said the security escorted the one individual out. Was the security a reimbursable police officer, or was it private? Well, it's private security regardless, but was it, an MPD officer on a reimbursable program, or was it just somebody they had for security?
It was their security.
Okay.
I think one thing to note, in the past, before the pandemic, we had MPD officers that would do the reimbursable overtime for 18th Street. But since the pandemic, I don't believe any of that has been reinstated. And last I heard, there's one Colonial parking garage that may be in the process of reinstating either an off-duty officer for hire or something like that. So it would be very beneficial if going forward, the reimbursable details for certain establishments could be restarted, because that'll provide a constant presence on 18th Street.
Why were they stopped? I mean, obviously when the restaurants closed, they stopped, but I mean, once things opened up, why weren't they?
So that's something that is usually optional for the establishments. And what happens is when they work with, if it's an ABC establishment and they request to initiate an MPD officer to work overtime, they do a package, and I believe it's possibly partially funded by ABRA. I don't know the details of that program, but it's going to be optional for most establishments to initiate, because there is a portion of the cost that they have to pay. Now, there's certain situations where if ABRA does an investigation on a location that had some violent crime or some violations, and it becomes mandated that in order to operate, they are required to have MPD working to cover that specific time period, then it becomes something that they have to do. And at that point, we try to accommodate. But even when the restaurants set it all up and put it out and make it available, it's not a guarantee that there will be enough officers to sign up for it. But that would be a move in the right direction.
Okay, if that's it from the commissioners, then let's open it up to the public to ask questions. And please be respectful in your questions and commentary.
Hi, Captain Hong and commissioners. It's Dennis James calling in.
Hi, Dennis. Feel free to,
Hey.
Is this directly about the public safety and police?
Yeah, it is. It's regarding some of the comments that Captain Hong just was making. Captain, I've noticed that Air Restaurant wands people going in to the establishment on the sidewalk in front of the establishment. Now, I don't know whether the person who did the shooting had a gun going in, or perhaps it was caged. I don't know, is that the right word? Caged? C-A-C-H-E-D? Somewhere else, in a car, or somebody else had it or whatever. But it brings that question to mind. If both of the people, the assailant and the victim, were in Air and one of them had a gun, it makes me question how effective the security is and the wanding, which I've witnessed going on 18th Street in broad daylight, as a matter of fact. That's just a question that would be in my mind. But about the reimbursable details, generally speaking, the bid had been the main participant in hiring reimbursable detail officers for Adams Morgan. I don't know too much about how many and how often. Occasionally, different establishments would hire those officers. And it's my understanding that it has to be at least 2 officers, and it has to be for a minimum of 4 hours. So if that's incorrect, please say so. I'd be interested to know. And it's true that I think ABRA pays approximately half of the cost if it's an ABC establishment.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you for that. So yeah, the 2-part question I'll do in order. As far as the Air Restaurant and Lounge, after the incident occurred, I got in contact with ABRA, and I learned some interesting things. So they advised when they checked, because Air has a restaurant license, they're not required to have security or have a security plan. However, voluntarily, they have one set up, and voluntarily, they do have security cameras and the security that was observed on that night doing the pat downs of the subjects. So it's not required, but something that they were doing voluntarily, just as an extra measure of safety. And reviewing their security plan, it does appear that they did everything in that aspect of it. In the verbal argument inside, according to their plan, they saw the incident, they separated the individuals, determined who was the aggressor in their opinion, and they escorted them out, and they didn't allow them back in. So that was something good to learn. And ABRA is also working with us. So they are looking into the aspect of the firearm possibly going into the establishment and coming out. And on the NPD side, we've also prepared a fact-finding letter just to see if ABRA if it's something that ABRA can look into more in depth. As far as the RDO program, I know I was on the call. I was in a meeting with Adams Morgan Bid yesterday, and it was also mentioned there. And I believe they were one of the things they were going to discuss is possibly funding for the RDO program to come back, possibly in the warmer months of this spring, summer. So that's something that would be great. I know initially, as soon as we had the height of the epidemic open up, I had immediately asked about if McDonald's on 18th and Columbia, which used to have RDO, and some of the other establishments, if we could reach out to see if they're interested in starting that up again. But at that time, economically, they were not in a position and they didn't have the volume of customers as before. So they didn't see the need and they didn't have the funding. So, which is understandable. It was a different difficult period for businesses.
Thank you. Do we have any other? It looks like we had one other hand raised. I believe Brian. Oh, it looks like we have three now. So first Brian, and then I see Taylor's hand up, and then another 202 number.
Hey, thanks, commissioners. I just wanted to clarify about the bid and the RDO. This is Brian Barry. I'm with the Adams Morgan bid for everybody. The bid didn't pay for all the RDO officers. We helped coordinate businesses hiring RDO officers. They would basically, it would be a pass through. They pay for the officers through us, and then we had a security consultant who helped coordinate it. But the RDO program abruptly came to a stop in March of 2020 for obvious reasons. Restaurants, everything shut down. When stuff started opening back up again, the nightlife didn't pick up immediately, and it's still not where it used to be. But you know, the restaurants and bars were still struggling financially, and I'm sure it's as simple as a case of you don't pay for something until you realize you really need it. So our board is looking at it again. We no longer have that security officer position. We had to make fairly severe cutbacks financially in 2020, and money moved around to other projects. But it's something that our board, like Captain Hong said, it's something we're looking at going into the warmer months.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor? You're off mute, but we're not getting any audio yet, Taylor.
I think I may be able to stay on for one or two more questions, and then I'll have to relieve my other counterparts.
Thank you, Captain. Appreciate your time. Taylor, I'm really sorry, but we're not getting any audio through from you right now. Why don't we give it just 5 more seconds, and then if you need to, you can either email me the question or you can drop it in the chat, and I can vocalize it for you.
Sure. Can you hear me okay now?
Have you now, Taylor? Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm traveling. I just first want to say thanks to Captain Wong and his team. I know they have a really hard job and extremely resource constricted, and appreciate everything you and your team are doing. It's, it doesn't go unnoticed, and we really, really appreciate it. I know y'all have a hard job out there. I guess the question is sort of directed towards Brian. So I assume revenue for the bid is decreased as revenue goes down for the businesses. And so if that is the case, has there been a plan to have a conversation with the city council? I mean, to me, this does not seem like a business issue. I mean, the business's job is not to protect us. That's the council's job to protect us. That's what we all pay taxes for. That's what the businesses pay taxes for. So I'd like to so no, if it shouldn't be on the bid, I don't think, and of course, it shouldn't be on anyone other than the government. I think to actually provide those resources to ensure that we don't have these instances continuously happen. And sort of to wrap up, I don't think it's just the shootings that we talked about. I mean, there's been multiple issues, even with mental health patients, I think, and that's been on a steady increase. And we've had a small exchange with Captain Hong this week, and I think it's been pretty evident that there's been some particular individuals that I have activated 911, and I'm an EMS provider. I've activated 911 a couple of times on, and sort of nothing happens. And then, of course, there's a big issue this weekend. So just sort of how do we address that, and how do we ensure that maybe we're getting resources from the district to be able to address this, and not just our businesses.
Thank you for those questions, Taylor. Captain Hong, are you able to respond to that?
Oh yeah, I thought it was mainly for Brian, but yeah, I'll respond for the MPD aspect of it. We have seen an increase in mental health consumers or citizens experiencing crises in the Adams Morgan area, and so we deal with it the way we normally do. Treat them as sick persons. See if they need treatment, if we need to contact someone from the Department of Behavioral Health, or if they simply need to go to the hospital or CPEP for psychological evaluation. When there's the aspect of crime, then we will assess the, I guess, mental capacity and the totality of the circumstances. So just recently, we had one where a citizen was simply telling someone who seemed to be having a ongoing mental issue, and he kind of became very aggressive and started threatening harm. And so when we arrived and we saw the totality, we placed that person under arrest, and that person was also provided medical services at CPEP. So we tried to do that. And on a case by case, and in the long run, it's going to be the Department of Behavioral Health that has caseworkers that know the medical history of these different individuals that can best provide a long-term solution. What we have seen is a lot of these situations, just like any priorities, and just like a robbery or a fight, when we have calls for potentially violent persons having a mental health crisis, that's a call where multiple officers are called. And so that's another thing. It does become a tax on our staffing and ability to respond to 911 calls, because a call like that may require 4 officers to go. It may take 2 vehicles out of service until the person's under control, and until we can get them transported and safely admitted to the hospital or wherever they need to go, and then also the paperwork after that. So that's just a food for thought that many people may not realize. A call like that can be very draining to our abilities to respond as well. So the long-term solutions by other agencies would be best.
Thank you, Captain. And we can address Taylor's other comments maybe after you leave, because I think some of those were broader general discussion comments. And I'm trying to be mindful of your time. We do have one more hand raised. If you have just a minute, I believe it's Dennis James again on his 202 number. So let's take that really quick, and then if it's not directed directly at you, Captain Hong, then we'll let you get back to your other duties. We know you're extremely busy.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for coming back to me. I had a follow-up for Captain Hong.
Yes.
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My follow-up is really quite simple, and it's somewhat similar to the comments of the previous speaker. Why can't MPD provide adequate staffing for 18th Street. Within Adams Morgan, we have over 60 ABC licenses. Numerous of them have entertainment, making it a draw for folks to come to our neighborhood. Admittedly, business isn't what it once was, but it's still a lot of, there's a lot of activity. And, there's almost 18,000 people that live in the neighborhood. Why aren't there more MPD officers visible on 18th Street on a Saturday night?
Yeah, it's probably not going to be an in-depth, comprehensive answer, but the main bottom line issue is going to be staffing, and I've referenced it in yesterday's meeting. But when I came to the third district, first in January 2014, being promoted as sergeant, we had a lot more officers than we have now. Even officials wise, our promotion class brought 9 officials in one class to the third district. And that allowed, we had 2 separate, totally dedicated groups of officers and officials just dedicated to the U Street corridor, which was Focus Feet, and the 18th Street corridor, which was nightlife. Because overall, throughout the department, and especially including the third district, our numbers are nowhere near what it used to be. It's just been us trying to do more with less, and us trying to use as much of the intelligence and statistics and the crime trends to actively move and address those and be flexible so that our officers are able to respond to any calls. Just as a simple example, if let's say hypothetically we have 3 officers that are assigned mainly to the area of PSA 303 on a weekend night. If we have 2 calls for fights going on at 2 different locations, fights are priorities that require 2 officers or more. And right there, you're going to have 4 officers that are going to handle 2 different fights that just came out. And if you look at the call volumes on the Friday night, Saturday night, especially in the warmer months, it's just nonstop. And I've often had to, when I'm working those nights, I've had to just get in the car and just start going from run to run to back officers up. Just because if we don't do that, then the runs keep building up and the dispatchers keep pushing down the non-priorities farther and farther down the list. And the only things we're able to keep on attacking are the priority calls. And then that leads to people being dissatisfied with calling 911 for something that's not as much of a priority, but that's important to them, and not getting a response for an extended period of time. So just to wrap up, once we have the staffing, of course, it's going to be redistributed, and it's going to benefit overall the third district. But right now, we're just trying to do what we can.
Thank you, Captain. We appreciate your time so much. Thanks for being here. We're going to promote Brian with the bid to just speak one last time to a couple of the issues that Taylor raised. And then while we're doing that, I'll just note too that we hear the concerns of the neighborhood. We definitely understand that, folks are concerned about these public safety issues, and that these will also, Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, her staffer is here on this call tonight. She's hearing this. And so these will be elevated and raised up to make sure that that the city council and others know that the neighborhood has concerns. And I appreciate folks coming here tonight to speak up about these issues. Oh, there's Brian.
Hey, thanks. So so just to answer Taylor's question, we, agree that security should be handled by the city. These businesses put a lot of money into the city coffers. But Captain Hong took most of my answer. It's MPD staffing is the biggest problem. 4 or 5 years ago on 18th Street, they had a nightlife division. They would bring a van out. There'd be an exceedingly visible police presence that you couldn't not see, and it was a visual deterrent to people making trouble. Yeah, but it's the RDO program. I'm not the budget guy. I want to say the subsidized rate is $70 an hour, and you have to hire two for a 4-hour shift. So that's an extra $500. And frankly, we've been, knock on wood, it hasn't been, we haven't had the issues we used to have until obviously the recent unpleasantness. It seems like a lot of the bad actors are down on U Street, 14th Street area in this part of DC. So it hasn't been as big an issue, and so there haven't been the calls for extra policing. We would love to see the nightlife division back and patrolling, but yeah, until MPD can increase their staffing, that doesn't seem likely.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. I am going to move on to the next item on the agenda. We have our first fire safety report. So Captain Faulkner, if you could please raise your hand so that we can promote you to speak. I hope that the captain didn't try to show up and then, oh, there he is. I see him, Captain Stephen Faulkner, CS. If you could please promote him, Sean.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Captain, you should be good.
We're seeing you, Captain, but you are still muted. There you go.
There we go.
Hey.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good, good. It's so nice to have you here. First off, I just want to thank Commissioner Peter Wood, who actually initiated this and asked you to attend the meeting. So thank you, Commissioner Wood, for initiating this. And Captain Faulkner, welcome to the neighborhood and welcome to the ANC. You want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Thank you so much. It is a true pleasure and honor to work with you guys, and it's nice to have community contacts. So my name's Steve Faulkner. Steven's the full name, but I go by Steve. And Faulkner, like the writer. I'm the captain at Engine 21 in Adams Morgan, on their place. I just went there, just got promoted, and then appointed and assigned there in October. So towards the end of October. So I definitely wanted to reach out to you guys and just make sure that you guys had my contact information. And obviously, if anything pressing happens in the neighborhood, I wanted to make sure that I was able to just, at least get in touch with you guys by phone or by email and just give you an update on, what we ran or what we experienced. So far, I don't have much information. We haven't had too many critical calls that were actually in the Adams Morgan and Calorama area. So sorry if I seem distracted. I have two boys, and my youngest is tugging at my shirt. But we've had well, I guess I'll start there and see, and then we'll go into the rest of it. But that is my introduction. So it is a pleasure to meet all of you guys. And we did get some cupcakes actually from one of the ANC commissioners. I think they were delivered on Christmas. So I want to say thank you for that as well.
It's not Christmas anymore.
That's so great. How old are your kids?
So I have two boys. My youngest is 4. That's Dylan. So
Hey, Dylan.
hi. Okay. Okay. You're done. Shh. All right. That's mine. And then my oldest is 12. So he's upstairs. You won't see much of him. He's he's a preteen now, so he does his own thing. So but yeah, those are my two.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the neighborhood. We're so happy to have you. I guess my only question is, what's the house? What's the house look like? How many staff do you have? You have one engine, right? And then one
Yes.
EMS truck.
Yes.
Is that the extent of the house?
That's it. Yep, that's it. So we have one engine and we've got 4 personnel, including the officer, that are on the engine. And we also have 2 personnel on the medic unit, 1 EMT and 1 firefighter EMT and 1 firefighter paramedic on the medic unit. So a total of 6 per day, unless there is a large event in in the city and the department decides to upstaff units, which is very rare. So on any given day, it's 6 people there. And we have 4 shifts that are there around the clock. 24-hour shifts that start at 7 a.m. and then end the following day at 7 a.m. There'll always be the same people there. It's myself. I have 3 lieutenants that work under me that work on the other 3 shifts. And other than that, it could be any number of personnel on the fire truck. It is the same people assigned per shift, but we always assign a couple extra people per shift just for the staffing factor to account for leave and sick leave and stuff like vacation and stuff like that.
It looks like Commissioner Wood has a question, so I will cede the floor.
Hey, thanks. Hey, Captain, good to see you. I'll be quick. I mean, just one kind of general question. I know that there's like typical things for people to look out for at this time of year in terms of kind of risk factors that you get exposed to. I think the main ones that I know of are businesses have to make sure their gas tanks or the outdoor heaters have to be locked up at night. It's always good to monitor what's it called, space heaters, and just don't overload outlets. Is there any other advice just for these kind of colder months that you've noticed in patterns that could be helpful for both residents and commercial property managers to look out for?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, so there are a couple things that kind of stick out in my mind. One of them, in addition to the space heaters and the propane tanks, are the gas powered generators. So sometimes a lot of people will tend to run those gas powered generators. One second. All right. So the gas powered generators, they will tend to, sometimes people run them for, if they're going to have an event outside or if they're doing construction in their house. We've seen people run them really, really close to the entrance or really close to a window or even inside of the basement. And what that does is builds up carbon monoxide. The concern is, especially in a place like Adams Morgan, is a lot of the row houses have the English style basements where there's separate families that are living in 2 different portions of the same row house. So we just have to be cognizant that the things that we do and then our own unit will and can affect the persons and families above us and next to us, especially in those row houses.
That's helpful. I'm in one of those English patients right now, so I get it. Thanks.
And then other than that, with the space heaters, I want to be really careful not to overload the extension cords, not to overload outlets. Because sometimes, again, with older construction, some of the houses have very limited number of outlets per room. And then what will tend to happen is, especially with people that have furnaces and stuff like that, is if they plug in a space heater, you have to really make sure that that outlet is not overloaded with additional heaters or anything that's going to draw a large amount of current coming out of the same circuit, and definitely not on power strips. So I would venture to say that the safest bet is if people are going to use a space heater to keep it a minimum of about 3.5 feet away from anything combustible, and then also make sure that that there's nothing else on that circuit, that you're just using the space heater. There's no other high wattage item that's going to be drawing on that as well. And also not to plug that space heater into extension cords and power strips, because that actually, the longer, I don't want to get too technical with it, but the longer of a run that electricity has to follow going through a particular conduit, the more resistance you actually put into that line. So that's why space heater cords are usually pretty short. It's not, they're not meant to be run off a 50-foot extension cord down the hole, stuff like under carpet and stuff like that. So those are the big things to really be careful about this time of year is space heaters and then carbon monoxide. And especially, this time of year, even furnaces are running a lot. So if there is a leak or a crack in the flue, we could have a carbon monoxide leak. So it's really important that, anyone that has a gas appliance in their home, whether it's a water heater or furnace, that they have a carbon monoxide detector on each level of the home, just to make sure that they can, be alerted if there was a leak.
Thanks. You remind me of two other things I think are worth mentioning. One I've done, which is make sure your fire alarm batteries are updated. And the other, get the lint out of your dryer. I'm always so bad about that. I know a lot of fires get caused by that, especially this time of year. Appreciate
it. For sure. Yeah. And honestly, I think, and I'm just speaking for myself, what I do at my house, but the process is, once I get the stuff out of the dryer, it's literally clean the lint filter, put the new stuff in the dryer. If anyone needs it, if the outdoor campfire circles, a camper, little fire pits, the lint from your dryer is a great fire starter. So if anyone, I know a lot of outdoor entertainment happens, so that, people could use that in their little fire pits as well.
It's a good tip. All right. Does anyone else have any questions for Captain Faulkner? Let me just make sure that we don't have any hands raised. Looks like not. Just lots of welcome to the neighborhoods in the chat. And then there was an ask for your email, so I shared that as well. So just so you know.
Sounds great. And I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm sorry about the delay. I was, as you can tell, I'm wrangling my, I'm a single dad over here, so I'm wrangling my children. So trying to keep the house intact.
It's very impressive. And no problem at all. It was perfect timing. So thank you so much. It was great to have you. Welcome to the neighborhood. I feel very grateful for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And you guys stay safe. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, Brian, we're going to move on to the next, Sean, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. That's the Entice Lounge. For that one, actually, we don't have any presentation. So the committee is simply considering the renewal of liquor license for Entice Lounge. That's located at 1725 Columbia Road Northwest. If there are any members of the community that would like to speak up about that, they should feel free to raise their hands to speak up about it. If any commissioners have any thoughts about it, they should feel free. We have a settlement agreement in place with the Entice Lounge. Sorry about that. That's my puppies. So we have a settlement agreement in place, and that would not change in any way. I'm going to give it just 10 more seconds. I'm seeing no hands up, no comments from the other commissioners. It looks like there is a question from Diana Rojas. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
I noticed that Entice Lounge coming up, and I'm just curious, there is a, I don't know if it's a halfway home or what the home Christ House is for, but it just seemed to me that having another bar or establishment like that right next to a home that may or may not be for people who have substance abuse. I just didn't know if the ANC took that into consideration when issuing these licenses, or if that's something the city can even consider.
Peter, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so as far as I know, none of us as commissioners were involved with any recent matters about that area, but I know that I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, there was a potential nightclub that was going to move in like that adjacent strip of housing and commercial units. I don't think it happened. I know it was controversial. I wasn't involved with it, but I know that it's something that has come to the attention. This is renewal for an existing application or existing license, so it wouldn't be adding something that's not already in place. It's just this is the opportunity for us to review in case there were issues so that we could obstruct and help work with the business to improve upon those issues. I haven't had any issue. It's not in my SMD. I think it's in 1C06, whose commissioner isn't here tonight just because they're not on this committee. But as far as I know, it's something that has happened before. Hasn't been super relevant lately, but you never know. It could pop up again.
It is a good flag, Diana. I don't believe that Christ House is for folks particularly that have suffered from addiction, but it is, it is a home for folks. So we should definitely be considering noise and other issues like that. And that's part of what this is for, is an opportunity for members of the community to speak up if they're having any issues with the business. I personally have not received any complaints about Entice. I'm not hearing any other commissioners or member of the public speak up about it. And so with that, I will say that we will not protest the renewal of Entice's liquor license. Or I will not move for that. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda. We have a presentation by Taylor, who I noticed in the audience. Taylor, I'm sorry that it's after the time that I told you that we would likely get you up on the agenda, but I see that you're still in there. Thank you so much for your patience. And Sean will promote you so you can speak. While he's promoting you, would you just raise your hand so that he can, there you go. While he's promoting you, I just wanted to lay the groundwork on this, which is Taylor, I believe, is the owner of Mola Empanada, which is located at 2438 18th Street Northwest. They have applied to ABRA for a Class C restaurant liquor license. And so we asked them to please come and present to us about their application. Hello, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, everybody.
Hey, great. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your business and what it is that you're seeking in your application, please?
Yeah, so I'm Janae White. I'm the owner and co-founder of Mola Empanada, and beside me is Taylor Volpe, my fiance and co-founder of Mola Empanada. We started as a caterer popping up throughout Northeast DC, and as of July 29th, opened our doors as a storefront in Adams Morgan on 18th Street called Mola Empanada. We're a quick service cafe / restaurant serving Panamanian empanadas, other bites, and freshly pressed juices. We hope to extend that menu for our cocktail program, which Taylor is going to speak more on.
Yeah, so that was the basic rundown of our business. We're a pretty small space. Some of you might know the space when it was Donbury, before the pandemic started. We've taken it over. We haven't made too many changes to it. And we've started out, we're just selling a pretty limited menu. And one of the things we've heard from a lot of people is they would love some kind of drinks to go with the food. We don't plan on being we plan on being an addition to our menu. We don't plan on it being the focus. We want to just add some Caribbean, like rum drinks and some beer and wine to go with the empanadas and the small plates that we'll be serving.
Thank you so much. We love your empanadas. My kids love your empanadas too.
Oh, that's awesome. Janae's smiling. She's actually making an order right now, but she's smiling right now. That's great. I'm glad you guys had a chance to have them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're and it's a great addition to the neighborhood. So welcome and thank you for your service and your food. My one question was mostly around hours. Would you have any plans to change your hours at all based on these drink offerings, or would you plan to keep it the same?
So our hours have been kind of sporadic because we're still trying to get this up and running, and we don't have a lot of staff right now. I think what we would plan on doing is right now we close around midnight, or sometimes we stay open to about 2 a.m. When we have everything fully up and running, we'd like to be open till at least 3 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and that's kind of with or without the liquor license. That's what we always kind of envisioned. And if we get the liquor license, we'd probably stay that way, but we would always continue to serve food. Because we've gotten a lot of, we sell a lot of empanadas after midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. And then during the week or Monday through Thursday, we plan on closing about midnight with or without the liquor license again. And Sundays, we tend to close at 8. We might at some point go till like 10. I don't see us going any later than midnight on Sundays. And again, with or without our liquor license. Our hours really won't be, our decision with our hours really won't be influenced by the liquor license that much.
Thank you. And then do you plan to have any entertainment at all? It's a small space, so I can't imagine that the answer is yes, but were you thinking about entertainment?
We wouldn't be like formal entertainment. Janae has some ideas about maybe doing some cooking classes, like some like empanada making classes. We would love for people to come and host meetings here. Potentially use this as an event space, like a very small event space if people want to have gatherings. We potentially maybe some poetry stuff, or somebody wants to come in and play like a guitar or something. Yeah, but we won't be like a large venue for anything. Possibly we might do, if we have a lot of friends that are DJs, possibly if they wanted to do a small thing, but we don't plan on being nothing. Think of like a small gathering of friends more than like a big event, and it'd be mostly informal.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the other commissioners. Commissioner Wood, I saw your hand go up first.
Thanks. I don't really have a question. I just have two comments. One, glad to see you. I try to stay in touch with as many constituents and constituent business owners as possible, and you're the easiest to approach. So I'm glad that you're here, and your food's great. Second thing, just kind of related to, I think we've discussed it as well offline, but the placard, as far as I have seen, hasn't officially been released by ABRA. So it's just one thing that we have to, they do those in batches, I've noticed, on Fridays. So there's a pretty high chance that it just won't be an issue at all, but it's just worth noting, just in the event that nothing comes through, I'll be in touch with you as well, just in case, so we can get ABRA to respond to make sure that the paperwork is going through, because that's obviously a prerequisite to us taking any position on anything. But yeah, I plan on supporting your very transparent, well-run business. So you're the type of business that I think a lot of people in the neighborhood want to see succeed. So hoping to contribute to that.
Thank you. And Janae's smiling really hard right now. Thank you. And it's good. Yeah. So we have all the information into ABRA. I think we're waiting on there's a type of letter they send out. I forget the name of it right now, but they tell you basically if you're missing anything. We haven't heard back from them. We put the application in last week, I think. Our time is, it's been over a week. So we're just waiting to hear back. And we really appreciate all the commissioners allowing us to come and kind of get the ball started, so that because we are trying to get the provisional license so that we can start as soon as possible. So we really appreciate everybody helping us with that. But yeah, as soon as we hear back from ABRA, and actually we can reach out to them maybe tomorrow and see where we're at. And then as soon as we get that, Peter, I can email you or forward you the email.
And I saw that Commissioner Shapiro also has a question. Commissioner?
Yes, this is not specific to you, but in general, would you object to changing the hours when you can sell alcohol, reducing them, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights?
We wouldn't object, I guess, if there was actually, I don't know all the rules and everything, so, and we're new, so I don't have any firm feelings, but I guess we wouldn't, if there was like a concern that was brought to us, or like, I guess maybe like a reason, we don't plan to really, like, say after midnight on the weekends, we don't really plan to change the tone of the place. We plan to kind of keep it the same, and we sell empanadas like all through the night. So I guess we wouldn't want to not sell alcohol past a certain time. But if there was like a specific reason or like a concern within the community, we would definitely be we'd definitely give it any consideration. And if it was compelling, then yeah, we would definitely consider that.
Taylor, we normally, as a commission, enter into what are called settlement agreements with the business establishments that want to sell liquor in the neighborhood. It's a very common thing. They're negotiated normally by the commissioner who is in your SM or you're in their SMD. So although not always, sometimes field them out through the rest of the committee as well. So if you're open to doing a settlement agreement, we've done these with like, I think a good example of one that would be really similar to yours would be like Andy's Pizza, right? Similar sort of model, late night food, a drink here, you know, a drink also accompanying sometimes, but that's not your primary business model. So it seems like something like that might be a good kind of model that we could work off. We'd like to get that in place as quickly as possible. If you're open to that, we'd love to work on a settlement agreement with you.
Yeah, we would definitely meet with anybody, especially in the community with our customers and everything. So yeah, we'd be happy to meet and discuss all these things.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. And normally, the Kalorama Citizens Association is a community group that also has the ability to protest liquor licenses in the neighborhood. And so we normally try to make sure that they're a part of that negotiating table as well, so that, you know, you don't get side blinded by another organization coming in and protesting the license, that we're all kind of on the same page as a community about what we're agreeing to.
Okay, yeah, no, perfect.
Okay.
Janae's in agreement too. She's
Oh
right
yeah,
here.
I'm sorry. Just fulfilling some orders. I'm sorry, but I'm listening. Sorry about that.
Great. Thanks, Janae. Commissioner Shapiro, it sounded like you had something to say.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that we should, that the issue of simultaneously negotiating settlement agreements, I'm not so sure, since we're an elected body and the KCA or any other citizens association is not an elected body. I'm not so sure that it's appropriate for us to actually work hand in hand with them. I've seen that. I've seen what's gone on over the last years, going over minutes and things. And I was a little shocked at that. So that's something I want to raise. What KCA does, they can do on their own. And there's a specific, and there are historic reasons that the ANCs were given the phrase great weight. And it has to do with the citizens associations very specifically. So that's why I'm a little concerned that we not be seen as, arm in arm with them.
We can definitely talk about that. If they're not a part of the settlement agreement, then they would be going off on their own, and
they can go off on their own. Or the ABC board can really only look at the settlement agreement with the ANC.
Commissioner Wood, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I guess a couple related. One, Reed Cook Neighborhood Association is also in some cases a relevant entity, so it's not just KCA. And of course, other neighborhoods have different organizations. So it's something that's, applies to more than just one group. In my experience, and in experiences of commissioners I've talked to who have negotiated settlement agreements on behalf of ANC 1C before me, it's just been an efficient process. I definitely have questions about the kind of broader policy level questions of which entities should and should not have which types of abilities to protest some types of business transactions. But that's a bigger picture question. I think it's valid for us to discuss. Probably not best tonight, but yeah, just put a pin in that. I definitely think that's the conversation that's interesting and perhaps fruitful. So just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Were there any questions from members of the community? Let's open this up. Okay, seeing and hearing none. Taylor and Janai, we can let you go. Thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate having you here. Janae or Janai? Sorry, did I say that wrong?
Yep, Janae, yep.
Janae,
And
sorry.
thank you guys for having us and adding us. And yeah, and going forward, we remain open and willing to meet and speak with anybody, whether ANC, any community members or community groups, as we go through this process. We'd actually love to know if there's any issues or concerns that people have, because we'd love to address them. It's important to us being part of the community. So thank you guys very much.
Sorry for being there.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next item on the agenda. And that is an open conversation about the Morgan moratorium zone expiration. I wanted to first just give an update on what happened in our ANC meeting last week. So what took place is that we voted to agree to a 90-day extension to the moratorium. That will give us a little bit more time as a commission, as a committee, new members of the commission, recognizing that right now 5 of the ANC commissioners are brand new, haven't ever done this before. And so, coming up to speed on issues, also coming up to speed on just, email and all of the other things that you have to learn as you become a commissioner. So there just gives everybody a little bit of time to come up to speed on it. And also it gives this committee the opportunity to just place this item on the agenda for every agenda going forward through till we take a final vote on it to take community feedback. And we think that that's important. More feedback is good. It's an opportunity for folks to express their opinion. I have a form that I've submitted to my email list. I've now received almost 36 responses to it since I first put it out there. Those responses, 70% of the folks in my ANC that have responded to this have asked for us to just get rid of the moratorium zone altogether, fully opposed to the idea. About 40% think that we should take some sort of middle ground, keeping the moratorium as to nightclubs, expanding the number, or not having any sort of limitation on taverns, negotiating, doing it mostly through the negotiating of settlement agreements. And then about a third are fully opposed or fully supportive of the moratorium. Sorry, 30%, a little bit less, 28% right now, are fully in support of continuing the moratorium as it is. No one wanted to make it stronger. So that's the general feedback that I've gotten from my ANC. And I'm happy to, open it up for the commissioners to express any quick comments. And then we'd like to open it up to the community if they have any comments about the moratorium zone. Commissioner Wood.
Really quickly, thanks to everyone. It's been a pretty fruitful process so far of hearing from people in the community. So keep it up. I appreciate it. No comments other than that.
Thank you. Commissioner Shapiro.
Just for your information, I have reached out to the FPI, DC Fiscal Policy Institute, who did the 2013 study on the economic. I've reached out to them to see what it would cost and if it is at all feasible to get it done in a rapid order to update it. I also reached out to the BID, and they were going to talk to their board about perhaps the sound study that I believe was done in 2004. I'm not sure what year it is. I have to pull it up, but it's quite old. Seeing if we can't get that updated.
Thank you, Commissioner Shapiro. And at a minimum, it would be great if the Fiscal Policy Institute could come and just speak. So I would like to arrange for them to come in and at least speak to the report that they issued in 2018, 2017, 15. Is it that far back?
That's the one I have. I
Okay,
don't know whether they ever updated it or not.
okay. But it'd be great to have them come in and speak as to that report and whether anything, they can have just general feedback about any other movement that's happened in the neighborhood since then. Commissioner Wood.
Yeah, just two quick things. One related to that. In the past several weeks, I've tried reaching out to a lot of different people that have had kind of more of a stakeholder type position related to the Adams Morgan moratorium zone. One of them is a former employee of the Fiscal Policy Institute, not a current one. I haven't heard from back from them, but in any case, I think someone that is either knowledgeable on that particular study and or in a position with that organization to do something similar at this point would be helpful. And second point, I should have mentioned earlier, resolution got submitted to ABRA. They have confirmed receipt, haven't heard anything back in terms of if and to what degree an extension will be granted, but it's a waiting game at this point.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Wood. Opening it up to members of the public. Is there any feedback on this? We have, it looks like that's Dennis James. Can we promote him to speak, please?
Hi.
Oh, there we go. You're on. We can hear you, Dennis.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just to clear up the tiny little point, the DC Fiscal Policy Institute report was from 2013. Barney said it, but seems to have gotten mixed up a little bit. I just wanted to talk tonight about the reality of applying for a moratorium. You need to have a concentration of licenses. And we in Adams Morgan vastly exceed the concentration. I sent this to, I believe, all the commissioners, new and old. And we exceed the number required to apply, I think, fivefold for restaurants and similar for taverns. It's not just the two of them lumped together as a gross number, but it's each one. We have more than are required to be able to apply for a moratorium. And to be successful, the applicants for a moratorium need to show that 2 of the 4 appropriateness requirements in the code are negatively impacted. And those are peace, order, and quiet, which includes litter, and vehicular and pedestrian safety and residential parking, and over-concentration of licenses. That's the third one. And the fourth one is negative impact on property values, which I would never attempt to make any such case because it can be, such a wild and crazy ride in the real estate game that it's pretty hard to, come up with that argument. And it's not an argument I think that really is worth making because it doesn't really affect the problems that we have due to our concentration of licenses. So each time that the moratorium has either been, initially installed or each time that it was renewed, the board was able to see that we proved 2 or perhaps 3 of the appropriateness requirements that are required. So nothing has changed. The same number of licenses are still here, roughly. The thing that's changed in the license makeup is perhaps restaurants, because the number of taverns has stayed constant. Because they're a bit more valuable, I think. And even though numerous of our taverns have a food requirement added to them through settlement agreement, we don't know that the ABC board would ever enforce that. So that would be a huge risk for the neighborhood, because this board is a totally different group of people than the boards were when those various tavern settlement agreements were approved. So it's nice that it's in there, and hopefully the various in the settlement agreements, the language about a food requirement, it's lesser than the restaurant food requirement in all cases. And it's not uniform because it's a product of negotiation. So, to add more without the certainty that anything about food would be enforced, I would find doubtful. It would be an awful lot to pin appropriateness requirements on. So I didn't really want to take a whole long time to go over all the different arguments that there might be. It's great that more people are getting involved in this and paying attention to it, but I really do think everybody needs to focus on those requirements, appropriateness requirements, not a popularity contest, who wants more interesting bars or maybe restaurants. Restaurants can come. I just want everybody to know that there's no limit on the number of ABC restaurants that can come. So it's really, as it's been observed in the last couple of meetings, it's about how many taverns there will be. And I think I'll just leave it there. It's the taverns have been problematic in a lot of cases. I've been here for a very long time, and I've witnessed the problems that come for some of the taverns. I'm not about to say all, but there's been quite a bit of violence, and there's been at least one tavern during the moratorium period that was revoked for a violent incident, actually 2 murders, and that was in the year 2000. But anyway, I think I'll leave it there, and we'll, share information hopefully as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. 2 commissioners have their hands up. I would just add in there that those are the mandatory requirements that are required of the statute in order for a moratorium to be granted. The neighborhood is not required to grant a moratorium because 2 of those 4 statutory requirements have been met. It is only at that point at which a moratorium can be granted, but the no neighborhood is required to enter into a moratorium just because 2 of those 4 statutory requirements has been met. Commissioner Peter Wood.
Yeah, thanks. And kind of along those lines, I think an important point, which is the one that we've talked about kind of at length a few times now, is that a lot of those particular requirements involve a lot of speculation and kind of subjective knowledge, which we're hoping to back up with something more empirical. Doesn't always exist. But my question, I don't know if anyone has an answer. I'm just kind of curious because I hear this a lot, and not even just in this kind of iteration of assessing the moratorium zone, but just reference to different neighborhoods, in particular Adams Morgan in general, which is this idea of overcrowding of taverns. I just wonder, does anyone know if there's any actual quantitative, this is just my ignorance at play here, but like a quantitative measure of what overcrowding is? Like I can kind of off the top of my head think of ways that it could potentially be done, which is square footage versus the amount of seating capacity that's on the license versus the kind of estimated alcohol output that would somehow be, I don't know, based off of revenue or something in menu prices divided by the, I don't know, population density and other measures, maybe geographically of the neighborhood. Sounds like it could get really complex. So I don't think it exists, which is kind of, I think, answering my own question that sounds a little bit absurd to even try. But if I'm mistaken, anyone can point me to that, because I hear it a lot, which is we have too many bars, but I have yet to see some sort of empirical measure of determining where the line between too many and too few is. And I'd really be interested in learning more about that if it exists.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. If anyone has information that they can drop in the chat, that would be appreciated. That or raise your hands if you'd like to speak. Commissioner Shapiro.
You're on mute.
I was on mute too. Commissioner Shapiro, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm curious about you made the comment about the lack of enforcement of or inability to enforce settlement agreements. Do you know if in fact the ABC board has ever enforced a settlement agreement, or have any of the participants in a settlement agreement either gone to the ABC board or sought to enforce it in Superior Court? Would it be Superior? Yeah, the Superior Court. I mean, this is just an answer. I don't know the answer to the question.
Commissioner Wood.
I mean, maybe I might be thinking of the wrong thing, so I apologize if I am, but I mean, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this. I've spent some time just kind of casually reading through ABRA transcripts, and there are definitely times where people or institutions in Adams Morgan that have violated and then had, gone to a hearing about the violation of a settlement agreement item. They ended up getting fined and having other repercussions. So it happens. I don't remember the most recent cases off the top of my head. I've read some that were pretty interesting, but it's something that I know exists. I think most of the time it's reactive as opposed to proactive. So I don't think it's common for ABRA to send people out to kind of just, do the thing that the police often do, which is, have some sort of decoy 16-year-old that pretends that they're trying to use a fake ID type of stuff like that. I don't think is common. I think it's mostly if someone were to complain, then if they have the resources, ABRA will go and investigate further. That's the best of my knowledge.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else, Commissioner Shapiro?
No, sir.
We do have a comment in the chat from Brian with the bid. The 16 tavern licenses are widely spread through the neighborhood. They aren't clustered in any part of the neighborhood. And that is true. There are several along 18th, but that is not the only place where they exist. Yes, Commissioner Wood.
I'll go after the community member.
Okay. Can we please promote Deborah, Sean? Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, thank you very much. And my name is Deborah Zanowich, and I live on the 1800 block of Kellerama. I was one of the people who wrote into the commissioners, the older commissioners, as well as the newly elected commissioners. And Jake, thank you very much for your acknowledgement of my email. And it makes me a little bit nervous to have potentially more taverns coming into our neighborhood. I've lived here since 2010, and it's a neighborhood I chose. I love the diversity. I love the vibe of Adams Morgan, and just removing the moratorium leaves me with a sense of potential even worse late night unneighborly behaviors and things like that. And thank you very much too for also considering our neighborhood comments and extending the public consultation period. I definitely want to see Adams Morgan prosper and grow and fully supportive of businesses in the neighborhood, and also would like to see a bit more diversity than more taverns and just would like to see a little bit more diversity. So I guess I just wanted to let you know my thoughts on that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Really appreciate that. My one comment would just be that taverns doesn't necessarily mean only bars. And so, a couple of the ideas that have been floated are, Lost City Books is actually interested in getting a tavern's license that they can do wine sales along with book readings. We also had the idea of potentially having art gallery get a tavern license to be able to do art showing, like wine with art showings in the neighborhood. So part of the idea of this is to be able to allow for more diversity of businesses in the neighborhood. That can only happen with a tavern's license, because a bookstore isn't able to run a kitchen and sell food. Same goes with an art gallery, or a common paint type place, or a tavern license could even theoretically go to a nail place that they could sell a glass of wine along with you getting your nails done. So this isn't only about the idea of just expanding bars in the neighborhood. The idea is that when you have that license, it allows more flexibility of the types of businesses and sales that can happen, and that what those businesses are can be more narrowly defined through settlement agreements. and through support or not support of the businesses that want to come in. But hopefully it opens up more possibilities of the types of businesses that can come in, the type of diversity that you're talking about. I don't think any of us want to see, just a whole bunch of super loud, obnoxious bars going in along 18th. Maybe one or two more bars along 18th wouldn't hurt, but we don't want to see, some huge proliferation of them. So that isn't what I think anyone is hoping for here. But wanted to recognize your concerns, and they're certainly appreciated. And thank you so much for expressing your opinion. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Oh, looks like we have Michael and maybe Deborah. I'm not sure if you wanted to be promoted again to respond to that. So why don't we just give you the opportunity, and then Michael can speak.
I did. I wanted to thank you, Jake, for painting a little bit of a future scenario that could incorporate, I'm going to use the term a light drinking establishment. I know that's not a regulatory term, but it's one that I understand in my mind and things like that. So appreciate that. And maybe if there could be a compromise or a way to recognize that in some sort of the moratorium continuing in some form and things like that. I know settlement agreements can be used, but I also know that there's also community fatigue coming into the table and negotiating those, as well as the time it takes from our commissioners to do all of that. And we all want to see what's best for our community. So really appreciate your time and thoughts on that. So thank you very much. And I'll lower my hand now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Really appreciate it. It looked like Michael wanted to speak. Can we please promote him, Sean?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hi. So what would happen here if this moratorium is lifted? It wouldn't be like a Mad Max free-for-all right away, right? Each of these people seeking a tavern license or perhaps a nightclub license would still have to come before this committee, would still have to go before the ABC board or whatever it's called, and still have to comply with all the laws and regulations that the district would set up. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. And that is if it were completely lifted. And I don't think, that's I think not where kind of the majority of the commissioners were leaning after our first conversation about it last Wednesday night. So even assuming that were the case and the moratorium were to be completely eliminated, the businesses would still have to apply, go through the application process, be placarded. The ANC could, or any of the local community groups could protest the liquor license being given. So just as you said, there would still be many steps in the process for a new liquor selling establishment to come into place in Adams Morgan. Commissioner Wood, did you have more to add on that?
Just a little bit, both for Michael and Deborah, repeating what Jake said. Thanks for bringing your concerns here. It really does help us. Pretty similar views. I mean, for me, the question is a tricky one. Like in a more perfect world, we wouldn't have to think about how to incentivize businesses to fill vacant spots. And it's kind of a question of understanding the limitations of really the microeconomics and maybe macroeconomics. Would we prefer to have vacant units on the streets that are in commercial spaces sit vacant for a very extended period of time without any certainty of when they'll be filled? Or would we rather open up the kind of regulatory apparatus to make it possible but not mandatory for taverns to fill those spaces? I think that Mr. James earlier made a good point, which was that whilst not just in DC either, but across the world, really, a lot of places that do sell alcohol tend to have a history of potentially, this is an arguable term, but potentially incentivizing deviant behavior. It's a difficult correlation to establish causation, but regardless, I think the corollary that Mr. James brought up is important, which is there's a lot of taverns or places that are considered to have tavern license that are not problematic at all. I mean, just right here in our neighborhood, for Bedrock Billiards, just for example, if you didn't know, or Manifest, which has out of office, if you didn't know that was someone told you that those institutions existed, you'd be hard pressed to even tell them that there was anyone distributing liquor within 500 feet of it, well, excluding the other places down the street. So at least from my perspective, the goal is to try to promote places that are willing to, be community members. If alcohol sales is something that makes it an easier economic case to bring those types of institutions in, that could be a potentially good thing. Of course, there's a lot of risks. So that's the kind of risk that we want to mitigate. And it's not an easy game just because, we don't have the tools at hand that I would like, which would be someone going to places and making sure that they're not bad actors on a regular basis. That'd be expensive. It'd be inefficient. There's risk for discrimination. There's all those types of issues. I would like it for us to do the things that I think there was the original intent of the moratorium back in 2000, which was to try to promote diverse local economy. It hasn't happened from what I've seen. It's hard to sustain. It's been tried on different occasions in different ways. I wish that it would have been something that had made that type of local diverse economy blossom. I think it's worth trying other approaches, but that's not to dismiss the fact that nuance, I think, is really important here. I'll stop. That's a lot of words. Thanks everyone for listening, but I do really appreciate all of the input because there's a lot of detail for us to kind of absorb.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. Michael, did you have any follow-ups to that? And then also I'm curious as to your opinion about this. Do you have a position on the moratorium?
Yeah, so I think what I would say, I think the hard and fast existing no taverns, no nightclubs, period, moratorium should go. I think that's something that has more flexibility that would, for example, let Lost City Bookstore serve beer and wine in the evenings if they would so like. I think that kind of flexibility is good, and that just doesn't seem compatible with the moratorium that we have. I do think that it seems like a lot of people have brought up concerns about the alcohol regulatory boards and other entities in the government, their ability to actually enforce restrictions or rules on certain alcohol serving establishments. And, I think that probably is something that we have to manage. Throughout this meeting, we've seen a lot of things about how public services maybe aren't able to fulfill everything that we expect them to. And so I think that we have to be realistic in understanding that maybe if there are, I don't know the exact number, the exact direction, but I think if there are more places serving alcohol, there will be more people here drinking alcohol, and they will have worse decision-making skills and maybe engage in some conduct that we don't want to see. So I just think some way to balance the fairness to establishments, to businesses, and to residents is the way to do it. And the hard and fast moratorium, I don't think is it.
I really appreciate that, Michael. That's very much how I'm approaching this too. It just feels like the strict lines on this are cudgels, and that there's a more scalpel-like approach that we can take to this. And I appreciate very much that in my reaching out to the community, the vast majority of folks that I've heard from really feel that way too. Like they're falling in the middle on this. Like folks see nuance and they see gray area here, and they want us as policy, as their voice in the neighborhood to also see that nuance. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Michael. Commissioner Shapiro, did you have a response?
Yeah, there was some, and I don't even remember who it was, but made the comment that the tavern licenses are actually spread throughout the neighborhood. In reality, the tavern license are concentrated. I hate to use that word, but in the 2300, 2400 block of 18th Street. Out of the 16 licenses, only 2 of them are off of 18th Street. And one of those is at Vernon. It's right there at the corner. So literally it's only Bedrock Billiards of the tavern licenses that is off of 18th Street. So I just wanted to correct whoever said they were spread out.
Thank you. That's a good correction. I actually thought that they were more spread out along Columbia Road as well.
I'm looking at the list of the 16, and literally there's only Bedrock Billiards on Columbia Road. Everything else is on 18th Street, and of course, Manifest is down at 1806 Vernon, so it's 3 doors in.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we've got, I think that's Dennis again with his hand up. And Dennis, if you wouldn't mind just trying to keep it quick, because we do have one other person that put their hand up as well. Thank
Sure,
you.
glad to. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Shapiro's question about, does the board ever enforce settlement agreements? Yes, they do. But to get to what he was actually asking about, I believe, was would they? I said that I'm not sure they would enforce food requirements in settlement agreements for taverns. Now, and again, all those settlement agreements were first put together many years ago. I would say like 2006, 2007. But yes, they, like, if I had a complaint about a specific place and I noticed, that an establishment was obviously doing something that was not allowed in their settlement agreement, I might email or call ABRA about it and ask that it be looked at. Now, their investigators do routinely enforce settlement agreements. They go into places I'm not sure if they have a schedule or not, but from time to time they go through and do, compliance checks for settlement agreements. And not sure who mentioned it earlier, the underage service stings, as they're sometimes called. ABRA always does those in conjunction with MPD, and they use somebody who's underage, and MPD is there to protect as well as observe. So, that's not something that's so sneaky as all that, it's basic part of the law, Anyway, I won't take up any more time. I just wanted to talk about that particular
Thanks,
instance. So
much
there you go.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Larry Hargrove, who also had his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I was having a little trouble unmuting myself.
We can hear you.
Two or three diverse comments. One, for example, going back to what Commissioner Falaskini was discussing as to the possibility of broadening the types of establishments that could serve alcoholic beverages pursuant to a tavern license, but without having the normal and expectable characteristics of a tavern. I think in a previous meeting you may have mentioned the bookstore wanting to have a wine tasting in connection with the opening of Vladimir Putin's latest novel. It's an interesting idea, but I think one would have to look very carefully at the existing regulations to be sure that this was a vehicle that could be properly used to promote that notion. My initial reaction was that it's the sort of thing that ought to be addressed by the regulatory authorities, either the ABC board or even the council. And it has been commonly done in other areas of regulation. For example, district has strict regulations as to where you could put up a sign, commercial sign, but there are various provisions that make it possible to put up a sign in special circumstances for special purposes where you would not be able to have a sign permanently. For example, if you're a commercial, you own a commercial rental property and there's a vacant property within that property, you could put up a sign for a given number of days in order to advertise that property. Anyway, it's just something that seems to me perhaps not likely to be properly promotable through the ABC regulations, but might be pursued pretty readily through some other device. Let me make just 2 or 3 suggestions to the committee as you go forward with it. Right now, the community is reasonably justified in assuming that they're talking about a proposal embodied in the resolution that has been made public on the listserv, and which was adopted in a sense at the previous meeting and sent forward for consideration at the next ABC meeting. I think it would be incumbent on the committee, before finalizing its conclusions about the position of the public, to have adopted a resolution, whether this one or some other resolution, because it's going to be very difficult otherwise for the public to know what they're expressing their views on until the very time comes to express a view on the ANC's resolution, which is, by your own acknowledgement, is too short a time for people to make up their mind. It is relatively useless to ask your neighbor on the street, do you favor continuing the liquor license moratorium? The resolution now before you, and in a sense before the public, is a very narrow one, which is, do you favor adding 7 more taverns, or at least the possibility of 7 more taverns to the list of ABC establishments? This is quite a different proposition from abolishing the resolution altogether, the moratorium altogether. I'd suggest also that any gathering of evidence as to the pros and cons of liquor license moratorium be very carefully directed to Adams Morgan and its own unique circumstances. Resolution studies by think tanks on this question are going to be relevant only to the extent that you can tie the assumptions, the factual assumptions of those studies, to the conditions that exist in Adams Morgan. That connection, I think, is useful and important in trying to determine what those specific and special circumstances about Adams Morgan are, to do the best you can to find out what were the conditions during the 90s that led to the determination that a moratorium was in order. It's difficult to pinpoint specific detriments from the operation of liquor license establishments, but if I may be forgiven a crude reference, one of the motivating factors was that there was an increasing number of defecations on the front stoops of homes, one of which mine is one, on Colorama, Wyoming, and of course on Belmont. And that number has substantially reduced, and not having been eliminated altogether. Finally, I would enjoin you to be very diligent and strict in adhering to the facts and trying to determine what are the specific benefits and burdens of a moratorium. Personally, I see no burden imposed by the present moratorium on the business community other than the burden of not being able to serve liquor if you do not have a tavern license, which of course is sort of a tautology because that's the point of the whole thing. Just a few comments as we go forward on this. And I commend you for extending the period because without overindulging that noted authority on such matters, Dennis James, things were bad some of those things were eliminated or greatly ameliorated by the Adams Morgan moratorium.
Thank you so much for your comments, Larry. They're greatly appreciated. At one point, you begged for forgiveness. You have it. I also have been subject to defecation on my building, once even on my children's window, where they were sleeping in the neighborhood. And they were certainly not neighbors. These were folks that were, out drinking in the neighborhood. So I can relate to that frustration as well. Thank you so much for your comments. We will try to adhere to your wise words of making sure that we are considering the facts and only the facts. Commissioner Wood.
Things. I'll be quick because I know this has been a long meeting, but just a couple points I wanted to clarify on. One was the question of timing and if there's been enough time to address. This might be trivial at this point, but just kind of to repeat something that we've discussed before. If the commission, for example, were to favor letting the moratorium zone expire completely, there's no action formally needed on our behalf. That would just happen without us doing anything, because no one in the previous commission had an opposing view, which was expressed explicitly through some sort of resolution or letter that was put through the committee process. It just kind of didn't happen. And then I took it upon myself to put forward something that was not required, but is a nice courtesy, which is to convey language that would kind of promote or at least open up for discussion the possibility of supporting an expiration. It's been modified. It might be continued to modify, but that I think is important to consider, because it's not something that was just kind of left dormantly to never be considered. It's the burden of discussion is upon the people who would want to put forward some sort of document that calls for a new moratorium zone, which is essentially what would happen. And then the other thing, this is too big of a point to discuss tonight, but I think it's worth at least kind of just noting another issue that I do think it's worth considering, and it's hard to consider because I don't know about the data that exists, but a lot of landlords, I don't know how many, but at least some landlords are not particularly good faith actors. And there are some who will wait around a long time speculating that they'll get the right, quote unquote, right type of tenant for their particular desires. And that type of thing often has something to do with what types of tenants are allowed to be in those facilities. So it's complicated. I personally don't want, if there was a way to objectively assess who is a bad faith actor, that would make things easier, but there's no way to do that. So it's kind of the subjective process of trying to figure out which properties are problematic, why are they problematic, and which tools can be done to rectify those problems. It's complicated. So the landlord thing is, like I said, a big question, and I think it's worth thinking about more, but I just wanted to raise that to everyone's attention. I've spoken a lot tonight. Thank you so much. And really, Mr. Hargrove, thanks for adding your voice as well. I know that you, as well as others tonight, have spent quite a lot of time in this neighborhood. So it's very informative and just nice to hear your voice. So thanks so much.
I just wanted to add to that the intention of this committee will be to bring in experts to speak on this from various perspectives for the next couple of committee meetings. And so there will be more opportunities for folks to speak, and specifically about the presentations that are being made. And then we will put forward again a resolution once we've heard all of that. And the intent would be to put that forward either in our March, likely in our March committee meeting, to go before the full commission for a vote in April. That way we gave, assuming a 90-day extension to the moratorium, that would give ABRA just a little over 30 days, a little more than 30 days to act off the recommendation of the ANC. So that would be the hopeful kind of process from here on out. And I just want to make sure that that's public so everyone's understands what we're working from. If there are no other comments from the community, we'll give it just a few more seconds if anyone else wants to raise their hand and make any points. Otherwise, appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much to the commissioners. Thank you so much to Sean for running our meeting. He's our digital meeting manager. We couldn't do this without him. We appreciate him very much. And thank you to all of you for showing up and being active, engaged, and thoughtful citizens. We really appreciate your insight and your help. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.